Hello everyone, this is Peak Out Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk about Cobra Kai, and this time we will do a full-on review of the entire season 3. Now there will be spoilers throughout this review, so I advise you now, if you haven't caught up yet with all of the current third season, I advise you to go away, catch up with all the episodes and then come back to this review. I'll also provide links of previous reviews that I've done for season 2 and season 1, and also for the episode standouts that I believe throughout this current third season, and I'll provide all of these links within the description. Now overall, this was yet another fantastic season of the series, which I believe just might be the best television series currently around at the moment. It was another fantastic season, a great year for the show, really extended more on the character arcs and dynamics that we've seen from the beginning of season 1. And I think overall this might be actually the best season of the entire series so far. This season of course deals with the fallout of that epic all-out war within the school from the season 2 finale, which of course left Miguel injured in a coma, Robbie on the run, Johnny despondent and losing control of the Cobra Kai dojo to Crease. So the setup for season 3 picked up from the fallout of that event, where we see Johnny has fallen off the wagon, he's getting into fights, and his struggle to rebuild his relationships with Miguel, Robbie and Carmen became a big theme for this character throughout the entire season. We also remember he tried to reconnect with Ali, played by Elizabeth Shue. At the end of season 2, if you remember Ali, she was the original love interest from the first movie, so this season covers his reconnection with Ali, and over the course of the season Johnny has to redefine himself and find his place, very much in common with the theme that we saw from season 1 and really the overall arc within the character. His ongoing rival with Daniel continues, who himself faces very big struggles and dilemmas throughout the season. After the fallout of the school-out fight, we see it affects the reputation of the LaRussos and also his car dealership, for which he has to travel to Okinawa to try and save it, and through that venture he comes together with faces from his past. We deal with Miguel of course, who has to continue from his horrific injuries, and we see the struggle himself as he comes to the realization that he may not regain the champion status that he fought so hard for throughout the first 2 seasons. And this, as I mentioned before, continues the reunification of the bond between him and Johnny, which has been such a strong foundation from the beginning of the series. We also see that Sam continues to suffer from PTSD effects following the events of the school fight, and she goes on an interesting arc as she struggles to integrate herself back into school life following being suspended for a couple of weeks. And over the course of the season she really suffers from an identity crisis, and also she has ongoing paranoid fears about her eventual confrontation with Tori. As we all know, their ongoing rivalry was such a big arc from the final quarter of season 2. We also see some internal struggles within Hawk as he assumes the place of the #1 student within the Cobra Kai under the Crease tutelage, but over the course of the season he starts to look at Cobra Kai and all its extremities and starts to question himself and whether Cobra Kai goes too far and whether his place is actually right within the dojo. And we see this over the course of the season, particularly at the midpoint. We also focus on Tori, who continues her intense hatred of Sam as she deals with her own repercussions and punishment following the school brawl. And we also come to Kreese, who becomes the clear antagonist of the series, and we also get an extended backstory into his past in Vietnam as a soldier, and we get to understand why and how he created the Cobra Kai philosophy and way of training. So what was good about this season of Cobra Kai? Well, for me, this season really took all of the characters in a developed arc, as they all had to deal with what happened in terms of the school event. They all had to question their own possession and whether karate was actually bad for them. You know, I thought this was a very interesting take and direction in terms of the Karate Kid franchise, because if you look at the franchise since its concept, the idea of karate has always been used as a way of a character to find balance or structure or purpose within their life, particularly if you look at the first couple of films throughout the franchise. But this was very special, I think, this season, is that it took a logical step in that it presented karate, and maybe that karate wasn't the best way of life. We saw this particularly in the first couple of episodes where we get the fallout and the news coverage of the school brawl, and in the beginning of the first episode where we see the parents putting a committee forward in a bid to really outlaw karate. And it makes sense when we look at what happens with all the characters throughout the season 2 finale. It's understandable that karate would be outlawed or looked down upon by many parents who would feel concerned about what is happening within their kids. And I like this because I think it brought Karate Kid or Cobra Kai into much more of a contemporary setting. As I've mentioned throughout my previous reviews, Cobra Kai fondly has its heart set within the 80s, and that's good because you want it to retain that sense of what made this franchise so special. But I think the fact that this season there was much more of a reflective look at karate and whether it was actually good for the people involved, and this was good. Many people may have criticised that this made it a bit more of a slow burn, but I think it was good, and it wouldn't have made sense to have the fallout from season 2 and then start off season 3 again with everybody just happy-go-lucky and going about their karate. You know, that wouldn't have fit very well within the story. So I like the fact that we got a much more of a progressive story arc this time throughout season 3. For the most part, all characters featured heavily throughout this season, once again establishing that this is very much of an ensemble show, despite the fact that Cobra Kai started off looking at things very much from the perspective of Johnny. We have been introduced a lot more to these characters, and we've gone on a very successful journey throughout this entire series. All of the characters near enough are involved throughout this season, and I think this is what makes it such a multi-layered show and far more entertaining. The big standout character for me was Crease, and I love the fact that we fleshed out this character, taking him beyond the dimension of just being a cartoonish villain and antagonist for this season. This was of course developed when we got the scenes of the Vietnam flashbacks, and I love the fact that these were spread out throughout the entire season. They didn't really try and blow it all in one particular episode. Throughout each episode we saw Crease really reflecting on what happened to him before, as we saw the twin juxtaposition of him really making his mark on the Cobra Kai dojo. We saw throughout the season where he garnered in new recruits as he was kind of weeding out the students who we didn't feel were suitable enough for Cobra Kai, and he wanted to get far more athletic and stronger students for the group. And this mixed in very well on the journey that we saw him going out through Vietnam, where he's recruited into the war effort, and we see the conflicts and struggles throughout. This of course was very special for anybody who's in love with the franchise, because we also saw the introduction of Terry Silver. As we all know, this relates to Karate Kid Part 3, where Terry Silver tried to help Kreese gain his revenge on Daniel Miyagi, and the reason was that is because Kreese had helped Silver a lot during Vietnam, and we get to see that over the course of the season. So I love that, and I think the Vietnam flashbacks really gave us a bigger context and understanding of Kreese and his mentality and why he was so hardened in what he was trying to do within Cobra Kai. We're not asked to sympathise with Kreese as such, but we're asked to understand him and at least get a bigger idea of why he is who he is. And this is fantastic, and this is what really a show should do, is that you add depth and layers to the villain of the piece, and you structure it so you spread it out over the course of the entire season. Therefore we're always compelled to the character, and I thought Martin Covey did a fantastic job, you know, maintaining that hardened exterior within Crease, but also getting an understanding of where the character is at. And I thought it was a brilliant way to handle the character, and I actually like the fact that they didn't really make Crease defeated. You know, it's always a more substantial villain when it takes multiple arcs or episodes to actually confront him and match him and defeat him. And we see throughout the season where Crease is also very smart, in particular the King Cobra episode where he manages to get the upper hand even on Amanda. So Again, this added weight to the series where we have a very strong antagonist throughout the series, and I thought the way they handled Crease was very well done. I also love Daniel's journey, especially the trips to Okinawa, which features the cameo of both Kumiko and Chaozan, which are brilliantly handled and were logically integrated into the story. They weren't just put there for fan service. Both episodes were great, and particularly the fourth episode, which I believe was called The Right Path. This involved the reunion with Kumiko, who was very well played by the actress who I think is called Tamlin Tomita, and it's very sweet, the reconciliation between Daniel and Kumiko as they reminisce over old times, and this of course was brought to an extremely poignant and heartbreaking height when we have the scene together where they're reading out the old and last letters of Miyagi, who comments on how he met Daniel and how he became part of Daniel's family and how he was lost without purpose or direction prior to meet Daniel. And it's fantastic. It was really well handled, very heartbreaking, very emotional, brilliantly played. And also the episode following after that with Chaozan, who we also managed to get a great extension of the character. If you also know this franchise, know that Chaozan was the antagonist of Karate Kid Part 2, and I love the fact that Chaozan himself, we got some reflection in terms of his personality, and he paid attention to how he was at the end of Karate Kid Part 2 and how he rebuilt his life. And I love the scenes between the two, how he teaches Daniel that there were more secrets that Miyagi didn't teach him at the time, and it's all about redeeming yourself and finding more purpose and balance. So everything weaved well throughout. Fantastic to watch. I loved all the Okinawa episodes, and we had another heartbreaking moment when Daniel came face to face again with the young girl that he rescued in the storm within Karate Kid Part 2, and she became a sales executive and was going to help him regain his car dealership. So all fantastic to watch. I love how the Okinawa story arc was handled, just great way, and once again a further great example of how the showrunners pay reference to what went on within the sequels. I also liked Sam's arc, which showed a different side to the character. If you look at her throughout both previous seasons, she was always the kind of sweetheart, the princess who could always make mistakes but always had a mum and dad to fall back upon. But this time we got an insight into her and showing her internal and identity struggle as she really came face to face with coming back to school after what happened, and also with her paranoid fears about Tori. There was that great scene that we had, I think midway through the season, when Tori entered Miyagi Dojo and was drowning her in the water. So this was of course one of many kind of dreams and nightmare visions that she had between Tori. They've managed to stick with the ongoing rivalry between the two characters, and I've always think that's good. It hasn't been turned around in one instant moment. You know, we've seen the back and forth between the two characters, and this is something that is going to take a long time to resolve, and that's good because again you're adding weight and substance to the story. As with Hawk 2, who at some point had to really turn around and see the extremities of Cobra Kai, and again look at himself and question his own motivations and actions. This all comes to a halt in one brutal scene where we see him breaking Dimitri's arm. We have another brutal scene when he beats down one of the bullies in the King Cobra episode. So once again we're tapping more into Hawk, and this is a character that I think most fans always sympathise with, particularly in what happened with him throughout the first season. And I like the fact that they've stuck with this character and continue to lengthen out his journey, and this was another great turning point as we see for the first time maybe he's questioning that the Cobra Kai way of life isn't the best way to live. And it's always good when you have characters look back and question the direction they're going in, and I think that adds weight to the character. So I like the progression with Hawk. We also had Robbie too, who was going in a different direction, losing faith and feeling betrayed both by Daniel and Johnny. This resulted in the first couple of episodes when Daniel turned him over to the police and he had to spend time in a detention centre where we see him getting picked on and bullied on. Also, Johnny continues to ignore him at times because he wants to concentrate on Miguel and getting him back to his feet. So Robbie feels lost, he feels betrayed, he doesn't know who he can trust, and I think this is good. Again, going back to that theme of showing characters going on a different direction and trying to find their own path and struggles. So I really like what they did with Robbie this time. It's a very different way of handling the character and provides more interest to where he will follow throughout the season 4, as we see towards the end where he sides more with Crease, because we know Crease visited him throughout the detention centre. So really much more good storytelling potential, where we see where Robbie will go forward through for season 4. The action and fight scenes continue to be great. Most fights were well choreographed. The standout scenes included the Daniel and Johnny team up, where we see them trying to find out where Robbie is, and they come across certain people within the warehouse. I love the great staged action and maneuvers between the two. We of course had the great training montages between Daniel and Chalzen, and of course the epic brawl in the house out fight in the finale, which was spectacular and exciting. And this was coupled as well with the final confrontation between Daniel and Johnny and Crease following the fallout within the fight within the school. So that was all fantastic to watch. Most of the stunt work was very well experted. You don't really question whether the actors or not are actually taking place within the fight. The only one note was really the final confrontation with Crease, which I didn't mind because of course Martin Covey is over 70 years old, so you couldn't really expect him to take contribution much in the fight sequences. But overall the action and the comic strip violence were really maintained to a high level without this third season. And overall the show still retained that level of fun, entertainment and high escapism, despite the fact that it took a much more serious look at karate. Certainly for the 2/3 of the show, it was still bright, it was still funny, there were still plenty of moments of humour and comedy. And I like the fact that even though we're taking the characters on a different direction, it didn't deconstruct these characters. You know, I've always said that Cobra Kai isn't that kind of grind mark, serious, real life human drama. No, it's very much fun and footloose and free and very appealing to watch, but at the same time it takes a good substantial journey with its characters, and this was all great to watch. So we look at some of the bad points of that season, and not really a lot I would say, maybe more than nitpicks. I think the overall big issue I had was really the thematic journey and stages that we're going with the show. As I mentioned before, we get a good amount of time looking at the dangers and the hazards of the karate and whether it's the right way of life, but all of a sudden, I think it's the 8th episode, there's a sudden shift where we all of a sudden go back to having a tournament, and everybody is all of a sudden supporting the tournament. Everybody wants to fight to have the tournament take place. We have that scene where we have the committee meeting where Kreese, Daniel and Johnny all put forward their cases for being senseis and training their own individual dojos. We have Miguel and Sam also speaking forward, and I just felt in terms of the overall message and concept of the season, it was a bit jarring. It almost felt that there was a bit of a time shift. We spend 2/3 of the season talking about why karate may be wrong for the characters, and all of a sudden we jump forward to a pending tournament. It almost felt that the writers were very conscious of the fact that we were going in a separate direction, and they wanted to go back to the more fun and escapism of the season 1, where we talked very much more about the karate and the tournament. So I just feel it was a bit of a contrast that didn't ring true to the overall journey that we were seeing throughout season 3, and maybe it was a bit of a slight regression in terms of how the franchise is developing over the course of these 3 seasons. So it wasn't really awful to watch or terrible, but I just think it was a bit at odds with the themes and the concept that we were going through throughout the entire season. Also, in terms of sudden shifts, again I talked in the season finale review about Hawk and his sudden turnaround into helping the Miyagi Dojo characters. Again, this didn't quite ring true as to the journey that what we'd seen going out throughout this current season. The fact that when we have the epic fight, Hawk sees what's happening to Dimitri, then he changed sides again, and then him and Dimitri are best friends again. I think they should have held off on that reconciliation for the 4th season and just lengthened out a bit more Hawk's progression into coming over again to the supposed good side. I just felt it was a bit sharp and a bit quick overall. And just again, we got a kind of musical chairs with certain characters going one way and then the other. 1 minute they're with Cobra Kai and then they're going back again to Miyagi Dojo, and I think there's a certain stage throughout this series when certain characters are going to have to stay true. We can't just have them crossing over different dojo again. It kind of lessens the validity of the philosophy of each of the dojos involved. So for example, we see Tori very much, who was perhaps the second antagonist almost next to Crease. Are we going to get in turn and put with her character in season 4 and see her crossover again to Miyagi Dojo? Maybe she becomes best buddies again with Sam. Again, that can't be a simple turn, just like the Hawk and Dimitri was. There has to be a much more of a substantial development if Tori's going to cross over, and that's one example of what I'm talking about here. So I think the showrunners just have to be a bit aware as we see the characters going through different dilemmas, not to have any turning points happen too quickly. We then talk about the Ali arc, and I know this was something that everybody was looking forward to, the return of Elizabeth Shue's character, and I think overall it was handled very well. But my only slight criticism, I think it was a bit prolonged into the season finale. Her reconnection with John is very sweet natured, and I think it was handled very well in the 9th episode, but as I mentioned in my finale review, I think it should have been rounded off in the finale, because I think it ate up time within the season finale overall, and it really didn't need to be there. I think Ali's appearance is one of those cameos that really should be a one and done. I don't really see any future potential in her being prominent within the show overall. We've had her come back to the show. We had the great funny scene when she revealed as to why her and Daniel split up. We had the nice reconnection with Johnny, but I think her story is done now, and I think very much we should go back to Johnny kind of substantiating his romance with Carmen. I think there's a very sweet relationship with there. So I think Ali's cameo, while very sweet, overall was a bit hyperextended and maybe overstayed its welcome a bit longer than what it needs to be. And again, just a nitpick again, I think the end fight, whilst very epic and very thrilling to watch, kind of felt a bit repetitive from season 2, and maybe overall in season 4, will they go back to the tournament structure and have a tournament fight up? I could completely understand that they didn't want to go back to that formula for season 2 and season 3, but maybe now if we go back to originally a season 1 dynamic where we have a tournament fight out, and it will be interesting to see who will emerge the victor from that. So maybe that's where we will go to, as where we saw at the end of this season, where we saw now the unison of the Miyagi Dojo and the Eagle Fan Dojo, and that seemingly will be the overall battle going forward against the Cobra Kai Dojo. And of course we all speculate the seemingly pending return, hopeful return of either Terry Silver or Mike Barnes. I'm really hoping it will be Terry Silver, and that would be fantastic to see if we see the connection between Terry Silver and Crease as they continue to fight against the Miyagi Dojo and the Eagle Fan. So lots of great potential and things to look forward to. So if I had to give a score for this season, I'm going to give it a 9.1 out of 10. Overall, I do think it's the best season throughout the entire series. Just great action, but also great development and substantial arcs for nearly all characters involved. Cobra Kai is very much of an ensemble show, and as I've mentioned with all previous reviews, this is the right way that you reboot a franchise, where you pay reference and homage to what's gone on before, but at the same time you integrate it with new stories, new characters, new continuity, and you build a nice synergy between the previous characters and the new characters, and everything has a nice organic flow. And this is what I believe makes it to be perhaps now the best TV series currently on what we're watching so far. So great series, great continuation of the franchise, and I really hope they can continue the momentum going forward for season 4, and hopefully what I would think, if it does get to a season 5, maybe that should be the last one overall, because what we would hate is that Cobra Kai to overstay its welcome, much like Game of Thrones, where we had a once great show and it kind of fell at the last hurdle. I really hope that doesn't happen to Cobra Kai, because I really think it's a great show and the ideal blueprint of how you reboot and reinvent a classic franchise. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings overall on the third season of Cobra Kai. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How did you feel it compared to the previous 2 seasons? Did you think it was an improvement? Did you think it was a regression? What to you were overall the standout moments and highlights overall throughout this entire season? And do you think the series is strong enough to go to season 4, which I believe has already started filming, and maybe overall to a season 5 and beyond? How do you feel there's enough mileage and storytelling potential within the entire series to go beyond season 5 and season 6, or do you believe maybe season 4 should be the last one and maybe they should go out with a bang and strike while the iron is hot? So those are my thoughts and feelings on Cobra Kai. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons and help me continue to grow this channel within the long run. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves on a truly great season, a third season of Cobra Kai. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.